Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Let's talk about how you can be effective after the election, right? This concept of asymmetric communication tactics for after the election. A lot of people, when they're dealing with these asymmetric things, you see them out there, their intentions are good, their heart's in the right place, but they have no idea how to deal with an asymmetric communication space and be effective. And so I actually wanted to talk really briefly, because we're a little bit over the top of the hour. I'll keep it short here. There's two tactics that I've talked about already. And in fact, there's an article that goes over this in depth, but there's some good examples. And it's called failure notoriety and counter-reification. And the first one, failure notoriety, is when you see this group like this Michigan group, what I saw on social media is that this grab-ass bunch of clowns who wanted to do this and were so inept that they'd gotten penetrated by the FBI and were being watched and monitored the whole time and were basically playing pseudo-commando. I'm not saying they're innocent. They're guilty, as from what it appears from the evidence. They're guilty. They should go to jail. It's terrorism, no doubt. But when I see everyone treat this small group as the imminent vision of civil war, I just shake my head and like, no, don't do that, because what these people thrive on is the fantasy of power. They want to believe they're the Dark Panther of the night, sleek edgelord militia that's going to cause a civil war. And when they see social media erupt in people being terrified and fearful and expressing fear and doing all that, I get it. Fear is valid, but you have to also balance. When's the place you want to show your fear? How do you want to demonstrate your fear? And do you want to be smart in how you do it and not play to their playbook? Failure notoriety is the opposite. Failure notoriety is saying, these guys were a bunch of idiots. Look at how stupid they were. No one likes, it's really hard to be an edgelord when people are pointing at you and laughing. And that is, it harms these groups. If they take away the mystique and the mystery and the, you treat them, it's kind of like Charlie Chaplin and Hitler. You treat them as an object of ridicule. That's a very different psychological dynamic. And if it spreads over social media, that has a dampening effect because people want to be cool. If you're a normal person, you want to be cool and you post up, I want to be like these Marvel superheroes or something like that. If you're a domestic terrorist, you dream of starting a civil war and making people scared and getting them fearful. Well, if you see that reaction come out, then you think, well, maybe I can get some of that. So failure notoriety is the mass publication, both by media and by individuals, of ridicule, amusement, point out the flaws and stuff like that. It also spreads the word that this is very hard to pull off. If I think that anytime I'm going to plot domestic terror, the FBI is going to be inside my group with at least 2 to 3 confidential informants, fancy tech, and I don't have a chance, I'm going to be a little bit more reluctant to go down that road. So failure notoriety serves 2 purposes. One, it's a psychological damper on the cool effect or the mystique effect. These pseudo commandos, they're living out a fantasy. Failure notoriety dampens the fantasy, but it also spreads the deterrence of, you're going to get caught. You're not going to be successful at this. You're going to become a laughing stock. Don't do it. And that's a deterrence. That's one type of effective asymmetric communication that, after the November election, might be pretty good to point out. There's certainly on if we were thinking of where could we point out the failures of different groups leading up to this election, I think you could do that. Won't get into that too much because I want to get to the second. The second concept is a term called counter-reification. And I originally brought this up way, pre-pandemic. I'd already done my first coronavirus article, but I had a big article and it was about the OK hand sign and white supremacy. And I said, canceling this hand sign is the wrong approach. And the links are in to this article are in there, but we've actually had a really good case study because what I talk about in that article is something called counter-reification. And with the Proud Boy movements, if you've watched it all on social media, there's been this case study of the Proud Boys, and it's an example of counter-reification. So if you want to open the article now, you can read it. It's up on the InfoMullet. It was using the OK hand sign of white supremacy as the case study, but it described, and it gets into a lot of details in asymmetric communication, but it describes this counter-reification tactic that we've now seen used extremely successfully. And what it looks like is, and these are some graphics from the article, but reification, first thing, think about, and reification, and the term I'm using it, is how concrete is an idea. If I play for you the soundtrack of Darth Vader, the Imperial March, 100% of the people who hear that are going to think in their head Darth Vader. That's a highly reified idea. That idea means the same thing to all people. If I played some random collection of keys that I just type out and it's a random song, everyone's going to have different impressions of what that means. That's a low reification. Reification does with this concept of coherence. How strong is an idea in the minds of everyone to mean one thing? Low reification means one idea can mean many things. High reification is one idea means only one thing to lots of people. And this concept of the OK hand sign being a symbol for white supremacy, and it goes into the history of this and how it starts as a prank and then crossed over to the real world and all this back and forth. That's in the article. But what I did is I tried to describe the populations that were in this asymmetric contest of communication. And on the left were activists who were concerned about the use of OK to signal white power. Now, for sake of this discussion, operate on the premise that it's a legitimate concern. I think it was a legitimate concern. You can debate later, but for the sake of this discussion with asymmetric communication, the premise is this is a legitimate concern that OK is being used as a hand sign for white power. Small group of activists, they believe this. Over on the right is the trolls and racists using OK to signal white power. So here you have your two groups that are in conflict, in a narrative conflict. But in the middle, I call them the civilians, the vast majority who have no clue or understand that OK isn't as it's always been. And this is the problem with the OK hand sign has been reified to mean things like I'm OK for safety when you're scuba diving. I'm doing OK is just a, casual gesture. It means it's not, well, the reification of the hand sign as a means of white supremacy is very, very low. And what I was seeing is people say, well, what should we do in reaction to this? Well, we should fight this and we should cancel the use of OK and attack people who are using it because they're probably white supremacists. And that leads to this problem that comes up when you surrender the ground, and there's things in the article about when you should or shouldn't do it, but if you have a low reified idea and you surrender that ground and then try and attack it as a bad idea, what you've done is you've shifted the civilian population right up against the trolls and the racists. And what happens is, you see the activists here, they're using their energy for coercion to educate and cancel, which I mean is like to go out and to say, you shouldn't use that, or let me tell you that that's a racist symbol and here's why. They've got to punch through all these civilians that are in the way, this huge buffer. On the far side are the trolls and racists who are laughing because they don't have to spend much energy at all, and they've made the activists punch through this huge block to get to them. And the article goes more into this, but what it means to the activists, and when you're doing this, and they say you're fighting the forces, not their strategy. Their strategy is to make OK a legitimate hand sign for white supremacy, right? You're not fighting that. You're fighting their forces. You're fighting everyone using the hand sign, and that's getting you this bumper. It's very energy intensive, and then energy is aimed at the civilians. These people don't understand what's going on, but you attack them or you try and educate them, and they get confused, and there's backlash, and now all of a sudden, you're losing them out on the narrative discussion. The trolls and the racists, on the other hand, they exploit Parkinson's law through expansion. This gets technical, it's all in there, but basically means problems expand to the space you give them. When you surrender that ground, the problem won't politely thank you and cease there, it will expand to take further. It co-opts the existing legitimacy of OK, and the energy comes from the civilians. So it's in this scenario where you're trying to cancel or attack people for using OK, not a good strategy because you're letting the trolls and the racists be very energy conserved while you're spending the most. Conversely, counter-reification is where you diffuse an idea to mean many things. Reification, one idea means one thing. Counter-reification is you make it so the idea means many things. So this is what it looks like when you do a counter-reification strategy. A counter-reification is where you say, OK means it's safe, we're doing OK, but also make it, I even describe it, make it a hand sign for support for LGBTQ causes, make it a symbol for pony boy, all the stuff that you could find in Rule 34, make it a symbol for all sorts of causes that the trolls and the racists would not want to be associated with. What that does is that brings the civilians to your side. Civilians don't care if OK means many things because it currently means many things anyways. They can tolerate that, but the trolls and racists who want it to mean one thing, white supremacy, they can't tolerate it that it's being used as a symbol for support for LGBTQ. And so down here, you flip that energy dynamic in the asymmetric context. You've now made it very light energy, and you focus your attacks on the trolls and the racists because the civilians are on your side. Now the trolls and the racists, to get that it means only white supremacy. They got to convince all the civilians who are like, I'm fine with it meaning many things. I don't concern. And so the energy drain is now coming from the right side of this equation. And this was somewhat theoretical when I posted it. I used examples in the past of how ethnographic groups have actually been able to reclaim very reified terms like the N-word and things like that, where they've been able to reclaim that term and give it meaning to themselves that didn't mean its original meaning. But that was somewhat historical. With the Proud Boys, so what happened is in the debate, Trump's asked if he wants to, condemn white supremacy groups. He tells the Proud Boys to stand to and stand by or something like that. Very bad choice of wording. If you've ever been involved in the military, stand by literally means wait for further instructions. Like, stand by for order, stand by, more to follow, stand by and stand ready. All that stuff implies that there's more instructions coming. And he basically seemed to imply an endorsement for the Proud Boys. Well, what happened after that is a lot of gay activists began claiming the Proud Boy hashtag as a symbol of gay power. This caused a huge problem for the white supremacists that don't want to be associated with Proud Boys. What happened is they took something that had been very heavily reified to mean one thing. Proud Boys meant, a white supremacy group, further than alt-right, highly nationalist, chauvinistic, Western culture values. It meant all this manly, traditional Nietzschean kind of stuff, which generally isn't really truly Nietzsche. It's the German interpretation of Nietzsche that's found in the Third Reich, but that's a separate topic together. What the gay activists did, though, is by claiming the Proud Boys hashtags, they counter-reified. Now Proud Boys meant all sorts of stuff that those folks were not comfortable with. And you've actually seen this coming over from overseas with the Magna and the J-pop fans that have been doing this. The Japanese that are the most prolific social media users at all, they've attacked some of these hashtags by bringing in Japanese culture. And these counter-reifications are very effective. It's a asymmetric way of diffusing. So in the first case, I was saying, don't try and surrender on okay, fight back at it and do it in this way. Here is examples of counter-reifying something that was fairly well reified and breaking it apart to mean many things and losing that cool factor. It ties into failure notoriety as well. It loses for what cool means for this group. They don't want to be associated with something they think of as uncool, so it's attacking it where it hurts. And this is an example of a very energy effective way to counter-reify the meanings. And again, the article goes into this a lot more. It talks about when you should and when you shouldn't. How would you know the difference? Korean, yeah, I'm being corrected. Oh, wow, there's a lot of comments here, Sal. So let me go catch up some of this. Jerry's correcting me. It was the stands are Korean K-pop fans, not Japanese. My apologies. Surprising no one, my cultural familiarity with J-pop versus K-pop, not great. Not really my wheelhouse, so missed that. Yeah, Jay Peterson mentioned, I doubt there's a far-right conspiracy bigger than a bowling team without an FBI informant among them. It's not like the FBI is hunting for 40-ish whitish dudes. Yeah, or hurting, yeah. Yeah, if the FBI needs a 40-ish whitish dude to go be an undercover informant, it's a little bit easy to find. And Jay points out that the Bundys, which was the Maller wildlife refugee, they actually had more informants than conspirators. And that's the failure notoriety you need to advertise. You need to advertise, if you got a group of 8 people, 6 of those people are on the payroll of the FBI. And if you're not getting yours, you're the one who's going to end up in jail. If you're not getting the paycheck. Yeah, people are saying it was funny to watch on Twitter. So again, the article's in there. I'll clip the article. It's on the Infomol. It's a very long article. It goes through all the more technical details of why this is and the system dynamics of it. But if you're looking for, November 3rd is going to be hard no matter which side you're on. There's going to be things. I'm going to say if you're looking for effective asymmetric communication things, don't go out and play to the opponent's playbook. Be smart about it. Take your narrative framework and tactically think about what strategy am I trying to pursue? Is it pursued by advertising failure notoriety of the other side that's losing or these examples of failure? Is it better pursued by counter-reification? One of my challenges with OK is that we shouldn't surrender the ground before the hard fight is ended. Why are we giving up territory without fighting for it? A lot of these things are worth fighting for, and some of them are worth fighting to reclaim. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.